Hi, my name's David Weiss. I've recently published a book, Take the Phi Road, which is a book based on the universal design, the universal wisdom of Phi, and how we can use it in our lives, both for personal and planetary transformation. This is part of an informal video series, so if you haven't seen the introduction, please go back and watch that now, as I unpacked a lot of interesting and new terms in that video. I'd like to continue on and discuss the role of object-oriented language, subjective, objective, rational, irrational, and help tease apart some of the, I want to say, Phi, non-Phi hybridization that we've gotten ourselves into. Remember, Phi is flowing. It's a natural energy pattern associated with energy flow in this universe. Whether you're birthing a planet or birthing a newborn, it doesn't matter. It's just energy flows and there's a Phi relationship. Phi is continuous. It just kind of flows, just keeps going. It's in constant flux. Humans at some point adopted non-Phi in their thinking, and I suspect it may have been reinforced in the genetics. And this is based on the work by Dr. Bruce Lipton in the book Biology of Belief, showing that we tend to lay down in our epigenetic layer our thinking, feeling, and doing patterns. So I suspect that had there been a fall of man, as reported by mythologies and religions, we may have reinforced whatever trauma, whatever cataclysm, whatever departure from Phi that we potentially had at that time, and then over millennia reinforced that pattern. So let's get started. In the object-oriented language, we tend to put identities, boxes of thought, on a mental virtual reality shelf. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a scientist, I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I deserve this, I don't deserve that. These are all boxes of information. They're static pictures. Phi is like a movie or a river. It's constantly flowing. So when we put boxes out here that need our maintenance, we're tied to them, we're tethered. I want to say they create resistance or drag in our life. So if we say, and especially if we get into roles of victimhood, because when you make a victim box out here, you're tied to it. It's an identity. It's part of our narcissism. We're all narcissists. And I'm not talking about some of the more pathological narcissism that you'll find on the net these days. I'm talking about that we've given our focus out here to these false identities of who we are. And we rob ourselves of the very energy that we're built with. I mean, from a biblical perspective, that might be believing in a graven image, these mental identities. And if you want to pass through that eye of the needle, you're not going to take them with you. You have to go inside. That's spirit. That's where the spirit flows. Phi and love are intimately connected. Where there's Phi, there's love. Where there's love, there's Phi. So when you're out here and you're taking energy away from your spirit into virtual mental reality boxes, that's a deficiency that we create. And we have to maintain these deficiencies. If you say I'm a victim and you galvanize support for being a victim, then you bring a lot of people together to reinforce that. Maybe it's a belief that some group harmed you or wronged you or a family member or whatever, but we get invested in our victimhood. I've done it. We've all done it. I don't know anyone who hasn't done it. And it is a form of narcissism. And just face it. And as we bring our energy back inside, we claim our authentic selves. Now, let's talk about rational, irrational, and subjective, objective from a space of continuity. All right, imagine, if you will, a circle. It could be 4 inches in diameter, something that you can take in with your gaze. And recognize that circle is continuous. There's no beginning or end. And if you go back to high school math just for a brief minute, you realize that circumference, that outer edge of the circle, the length of that is defined by the equation 2 times pi times r. Now we're talking about pi, not phi, but we'll get back to phi in a minute. Pi is that magic number. It's called an irrational number because it can't be formed by a fraction. Rational numbers are formed by fractions. Irrational numbers are not formed by fractions. And pi goes on forever, 3.1416, on out to infinity. The other two measurements are actually finite, the number 2 and the radius. So that infinite connection is what gives that circle continuity. And if you were to take one little point of that circle, you'd miss the whole. To give you an example, imagine now the circle is 4,000 miles in diameter, and you've just walked up to it. Heck, you might even think a piece of the wall is straight. You can't really comprehend it. It's relative, it's perspective. And that's what we tend to do. If we see something that's too big for our consciousness to take in, we reduce it to that objective framework. And we attach a name. Well, this is a point. This is a segment. This is part of a wall. And we don't see the big picture. And if you're a scientist hired to study that little piece of brick, you might say, well, it's a brick and it's this long and this wide and this tall, but miss the fact that it's a circle. Heck, grant money isn't continuous, unfortunately. It's not infinite. So we get to study those objective pieces. And in doing so, when we go objective, we tend to divorce ourselves, separate ourselves from the rest of who we are, that subjective, that flowing nature, that perspective of who we are, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the physical, all those elements that make up who we are. So let's go back for a moment let's take phi. Phi is that spiral, the golden spiral that goes and just keeps going. We see it in those grand galaxies, majestic galaxies, millions of light years across. All those planets, all those stars. If you were sitting on one planet, though, would you know you're part of a giant spiral? Would you know that you're part of a giant energy web? I mean, really, what holds that spiral together? There's light years, hundreds of light years between stars and planets. What holds it together? It's that energy web, and if it's in a phi design, or there's a lot of phi character in it, would phi not, wouldn't you understand it that that's an energy web that supports that design? Where does it come from? So phi is also mathematically one of those infinite numbers, 1.618 off to infinity. And that's a sign of that continuity. And we find that continuity in our bodies. I mean, just the ratio from here to here and here to here is phi. We find it throughout our body. So what does that tell us about our physical structures? They're built with phi. There's phi architecture. So what happens when we're in that place resonating phi? We resonate fully. Think about if you were building a guitar or some other musical instrument, maybe a flute. You've got to measure everything for that note to resonate that you're going to produce. The string has to be so long, or the holes have to be drilled a certain place. It has to be tightened, and you want to produce that note that resonates, whatever you're trying to create. We're like that too. We're based on a phi blueprint. When we go outside of phi, we're tethered to a fixed static piece that does not let us resonate our full capacity for flow and love. So that's the difference. So when we fill ourselves with non-phi beliefs and emotions and physicality, perhaps even some of the synthetic things that we ingest, we denature ourselves. We add a non-phi element that must be overcome. And it takes energy to work past that, whether we're detoxifying something or whether we're just, it's like grabbing onto a tuning fork and saying, okay, now try to resonate. Well, that's what we do with our non-phi. We don't resonate as fully as we can resonate. So again, surrounding yourself with love, being in nature, being around loving people, being in that space of phi helps you resonate phi and bring that forth in the world. And that's the way it works. So I hope I've covered, we could talk about rational a little bit more. Rational is, in mathematical terms, is a fraction. You can fractionate things, 1/3, 1/6. You can divide up that pi. And we tend to fractionate reality into things that are bite-sized, that we can manage, and that's what I mean by fractionate. So we have this objective reality that likes to reduce, likes to fractionate, and we have the subjective, which includes all of us. If I were to compare it to an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg would be what we've identified through our objective analysis. The subjective would not only include that little piece of the iceberg that we can see, but it would include everything that we don't see. The whole, it's the gestalt, the whole. So whether I say dare to be irrational or be like the iceberg, either way, and go inside, feel the love, bring forth your facet. No facet is too big or too small. We're all in this together, and please join me on Facebook. Take the Phi Road. The website is under consideration and redirects to the publisher. And look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.